It started like most high-profile love stories, lavish, glamorous, and bulletproof from the outside. He was one of the world's wealthiest businessmen. She was the elegant, composed woman who stood beside him at every public event, smiled at the cameras, and raised their children in a world few people could ever imagine. Together, they built an empire, or so it seemed. But when the divorce papers were filed, everything cracked open. Suddenly, headlines weren't about charity galas or luxury yachts. They were about secrets, hidden lives, offshore accounts, private investigators, and the chilling question, did she ever really know him? This wasn't just a divorce, it was an unraveling. And at the center of it stood one truth. No matter how much money you have, no matter how powerful your image is, you can't outrun the truth forever. What makes this story different isn't just the scandal, it's what it reveals about human nature, identity, and how we hide behind success to avoid being seen. The billionaire had spent decades building his fortune. On the surface, he was generous, disciplined, and admired. But behind closed doors, a completely different story was unfolding. Secret properties, discreet relationships, financial webs, no one could untangle without digging deep. And the deeper they dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Not because of criminal activity, but because of the sheer emotional deception. She didn't know. Not really, and that's what shattered her. What do you do when the person you built your life with turns out to be a stranger? As the media circled and legal teams clashed, what emerged wasn't just a story of betrayal, but of identity collapse. She wasn't just losing a husband, she was losing the version of her life she thought was real. And here's where it gets personal, for all of us. How many of us are living next to people we think we know, but don't? How many relationships are held together by illusion, by convenience, by performance? The truth always leaks. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, what we suppress comes to the surface. And in this case, the divorce became the trigger that pulled back every curtain. But it's not just about the billionaire. It's about the danger of image over intimacy. Wealth can hide a lot until it can't. And if you think this only happens to the rich and powerful, think again. This story is a magnified version of what happens every day in homes all around the world. Pretending, hiding, hoping no one notices. That's why we tell stories like this, not for gossip, but for growth. Because sometimes, the fall of someone else's illusion can wake us up to our own. If this story intrigues you, subscribe to our channel. Every day, we share true stories with deep lessons about truth, self-awareness, and the human experience. Stories that challenge the mask and remind you of what really matters. And what's about to be uncovered next will leave you speechless. What's about to be uncovered next is the part no one expected. When the initial news broke, most people thought it was just another messy, high-profile separation. Irreconcilable differences, standard settlements, media drama. But behind the scenes, his wife had begun her own investigation. Quietly, carefully, she didn't want revenge, she wanted answers. She had lived beside him for 23 years, raised children with him, traveled the world with him, shared countless private moments. But now, with the facade falling, she needed to know, who had she really married? She started with the finances. Not the obvious ones, those were accounted for. She dug into the side accounts, the trusts, the foreign investments, and what she found was staggering. Billions moved silently across borders. Properties in cities she'd never visited. Shell companies with names she didn't recognize. But even more shocking than the money was the secrecy. layers upon layers of systems built not just to protect wealth, but to conceal identity. He wasn't just living a double life financially, he was living one emotionally too. There were relationships she didn't know about, conversations, trips, and histories completely hidden from their shared world. And while none of it was technically illegal, it was something deeper, a complete fracture of emotional truth. He wasn't the man she thought he was. And maybe he never had been. This revelation broke more than trust. It broke her sense of self. Because when you build your life with someone, you build your identity around that connection. And when it's exposed as false or incomplete, it's not just betrayal. It's a kind of psychological death. But here's where it turns. Instead of spiraling into bitterness, she made a different choice. She began sharing her story, not with the tabloids, but with therapists, lawyers, and eventually people who had experienced the same thing. And what she learned was this: secrets don't just hurt the person keeping them, they hollow out the people around them. She wasn't alone. Across the world, countless people live inside relationships that feel stable on the outside, but are hollow within. And many don't even know it until something snaps. This story teaches us something painful but essential. We don't always see the truth until we're forced to. And often, the person hiding the most isn't doing it out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of being known, fear of being rejected, fear of losing control. The billionaire in this story wasn't evil. He was fractured, compartmentalized, brilliant in business, but emotionally absent in his own home. He didn't build walls to deceive. He built them to survive. But those walls eventually caved in. And here's the deeper message. If your truth isn't safe in your relationship, then what happens when the public finds out is rarely about justice. It's about narrative. Control the story, and you control the damage. And in the billionaire's world, damage control wasn't just strategic, it was everything. The moment the leaked documents surfaced, the media exploded. News outlets picked up details of the secret accounts, discreet relationships, and properties never listed in any public disclosure. The carefully curated image of a disciplined, philanthropic icon began to fall apart. His PR team scrambled. Statements were released. Damage was minimized. Phrases like privacy invasion, complex financial holdings, and deeply personal matters were thrown around like shields. But the public wasn't buying it. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a collapse of trust. People who once admired him for his discipline now saw arrogance. People who praised his loyalty now whispered betrayal. And suddenly, the man who seemed untouchable became very, very human. But here's the twist. He still didn't understand what went wrong. In interviews, close insiders revealed he genuinely believed he had protected his family, provided everything, never let them suffer. In his mind, secrecy wasn't betrayal, it was management. He compartmentalized his life so deeply that he couldn't see the emotional cost he had been avoiding for years. He confused control with love, provision with presence, and success with safety. And this is where the lesson cuts deep. Not just for him, but for anyone who thinks doing enough on the surface is the same as being real in the relationship. There's a part of us that wants to believe that if we work hard, provide well, and show up in the big moments, that's enough. But the people closest to you don't remember the deals you closed. They remember if you looked them in the eyes when they spoke. They remember if they could trust you, feel you, reach you. The truth he never faced was this: people don't just want security, they want sincerity. And when sincerity disappears, the foundation rots, quietly, until everything collapses at once. His wife didn't file for divorce because he was rich. She filed because he was unreachable. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the more she tried to get closer, the more invisible she felt. She said something haunting in one of her private court statements. "I lost my marriage long before I filed. I just finally accepted it." That line echoes beyond their story. It reflects what so many feel in silence, living next to someone but feeling completely alone. So the question becomes, what are you hiding behind? Is it success, productivity, image? Because at the end of the day, what's hidden will always rise. And if you don't face your truth now, it will face you later, louder, messier, and more painfully. And in the final part of this story, we uncover the moment that changed everything didn't happen in court. It didn't come from a headline or a leaked document. It came from her, quietly, firmly, and without bitterness. She was asked, in a private interview after the settlement was finalized, what she would say to him if she had one last chance. She paused, then said, "I would thank him, not for the life he gave me, but for showing me that I was losing myself while trying to hold someone else together." That was the shift. She had spent years holding up the illusion, standing beside him, protecting the family image, sacrificing her voice to keep the peace. But in losing that illusion, she reclaimed something much more valuable, her truth. And that's the real heart of this story. It's easy to judge the billionaire, easy to point fingers at deception, control, ego. But the truth is, this story isn't just about one man. It's about all of us, about the roles we play, the parts of ourselves we silence, the identities we wear like armor just to feel safe. He wore success like a mask. She wore loyalty like a cage. And when those masks finally cracked, they both had to face what they'd avoided for years, the reality that love without honesty is just performance, that security without vulnerability is a prison, that pretending to be fine is not the same as living in truth. In the end, the money didn't matter, the properties didn't matter, the public sympathy didn't matter. What mattered was this: she walked away free, not just from a marriage, but from the belief that love means self-erasure. And he was left with everything except connection. So what do we learn from this? We learn that you can't build a relationship on image. You can't sustain love through silence. And you can't protect someone by hiding who you really are. You have to risk being seen, even if it's messy, even if it's uncomfortable, because the alternative is worse: living next to someone who only knows a fraction of you. This story is not a tragedy, it's a mirror. It reflects the cost of unspoken truths and the healing that begins the moment we stop performing and start showing up fully. So, if you're in a relationship, romantic, family, friendship, ask yourself, are you being honest? Are you being seen? Or are you just managing the story? Because the people who love you deserve more than your highlight reel. They deserve your reality. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it woke something up in you, consider subscribing to our channel. We share powerful daily videos that challenge the mind, heal the heart, and remind you of who you really are beneath the noise. And always remember this: you don't need to lose everything to find yourself. You just need the courage to stop hiding. We're here to help you do exactly that, every single day.